Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, it would be great if it was. You know, I'm sure there's other ones that sort of, you know, come in the top 10 or whatever. But yeah, it's one of the most common in your head. You know, when you hear sort of heavy metal, you think Motörhead, Ace of Spades, because it did kind of cross over that track. You know, whereas most of the other ones didn't. I do remember. I can honestly say I seem to remember standing in this little studio where we were doing it, and Lemmy saying to me, "Let's change that riff," and I'm going, okay, but what have you got in mind? So then that's when we went to E. And then this, I don't know where that came from. It might come from Vic, because Vic Mail was throwing in his sixpenneth as well. And that, you know, that was what I was saying about the album. Little things like that got changed that in the other albums, the other two albums, for instance, would never have happened because it was already done. You know, so this one we had a bit of a chance to sort of tinker with stuff. The other thing with all those tracks, especially Reptile, and because Reptile, just to say about Reptile, was in the verse, that was the verse when if we were having a particularly fast night, that became virtually impossible, you know. So it used to, but you know, I was telling you about the fast nights. So okay, the Hammer, that was. This is in E. Another of our favourite keys. That's
very cool.
yeah. The solo in that. I did one of those solos. Because, you know, there were times when you wanted to try and do something different on a solo rather than just thrashing away. But the only problem that we did have, of course, was the speed we were going sometimes. If you got a bit over-ambitious, you could find yourself out on a limb. Suddenly, you know, everybody's off. You know, they've started the next verse and I'm still trying to finish up my lick, you know. Which happened quite a few times. But, you know, generally speaking, you know, when you're live, people only hear it in and out quickly. Yeah. And then, you know, we come off stage, we go, that was a crappy gig, you know, and you say all that. And the kids come and say, man, that was the best gig I've ever heard, you know. And it's like, they don't hear all the little mistakes that you might make or whatever happens, you know. They don't hear that. They hear it as a whole thing. It's just sometimes we get a bit, you know, musicians being musicians, you know, or whatever they call us. Motorhead, and not really musicians, sort of motorheaders. We were motorheaders. This guitar, of course, was a little bonus thing. I've had it ever since the very early days. We had a friend of ours who later became our tour manager. I only had one guitar because, as I told you in the interview, I'd lost, one of them was stolen, and I used that money to... So I only had one guitar left. It was like a little one pickup thing. And I had to use that for the first year. And then this friend of ours who we got to know, he had this... He didn't play guitar, but he had this guitar. And when anybody used to pop round his house or anything, he'd say to him, if you want to sand off the guitar, you can do. So over the years, or over 6 months or something, people who had been round there actually got all the paint off this. And he linseed oiled it, and he gave it to... Well, he lent it to me first for 2 years, because I couldn't pay him, obviously. But eventually I did pay him. I didn't rip him off, you know. But there's a nice bit of history with this.
Yeah.
And it was stolen. I had it stolen in '93 out of my place in Twickenham. And the local papers did a big spread, and the police put it out on the radio, you know, the guitar, I got the guitar back about 5 days later. I got these frantic phone calls from the thieves, you know. Saying, oh, you can have your fucking guitar back, you know, it's too fucking hot for us, we're going to throw it in the river, you know. So I said, well, bring it around, I'll give you 100 quid, you know. So they sent some bird round with it, you know.